we need to talk about insurance. There's been an awful lot of talk in the media at the moment about the cost of insuring electric vehicles and the fact that that cost seems to be rising, at least here in the UK. Some even suggesting that they're becoming uninsurable because of the premiums being so high. Now, as someone with an insurance policy with 3 different EVs on it that is just about due for renewal, I've been a little bit scared of that renewal arriving, but it's here now, so let's talk about what seems to be happening to EV insurance premiums. So on this policy is this car I'm sitting in now, my 2021 Renault ZOE, my 2022 Citroen Ami, and my 2013 Renault Kangoo ZE. Now, generally for me, for a sort of main vehicle like the ZOE that I use for commuting and all that stuff, I'm reasonably happy if my premium is somewhere between sort of £400 and £600 a year. That seems to be the kind of ballpark for me for the risk that I must obviously present in terms of insurance, and that tends to be what the premium costs. Now, it'll fluctuate a little bit depending on the car, but that's generally where we need to be. The Kangoo was a little bit cheaper than that, sort of £400 to £500 seems to be about right for a small van. And then Ami last year was £300 for the year. Now, the actual cost of my insurance policy is fairly irrelevant to you because obviously it's made up of loads of different risk factors. You know, where you live, where it's parked overnight, what your claims history is like, any convictions, all those different factors, all that information you enter when you get a quote. So comparing sort of pound for pound for insurance, I've always said is really pointless, because what I get quoted for insurance, and even like the person that lives next door to me gets quoted for insurance, it's likely to be very, very different because of those various circumstances that make up the quote. However, when you start looking at percentage rises and how much extra we're being quoted for insurance this year versus last year, I think that actually starts to build a picture that is quite interesting. So, my Renault Kangoo ZE, obviously 10-year-old van, relatively low value, probably worth, £4,000 or £5,000. Relatively low mileage. I don't use it for commuting because it's got very low range. And last year I paid £435 for insurance for that for the year. This year, the renewal quote was £465. And so I wouldn't say that represents a worrying increase or something that I'd need to be concerned about. Yes, it has gone up very slightly, but then inflation seems to mean that everything costs slightly more now than it did last year or the year before. And so a little bit of an increase in premium, but nothing that makes me think, oh my God, electric vehicles are terrible. And I have noticed that a lot of people are saying their premium for non-electric cars is also increasing. So I don't know if this is an EV specific problem. My Renault ZOE, now it's quite difficult to tell you what that cost last year because I've only had it since July. So I had another car then, and it was an Audi A8, so it was quite a high insurance group. It was a little bit more expensive actually than the ZOE to insure. So when I changed over, the premium actually went down. But the renewal quote for that was £682, which seemed like quite a lot really for a fairly run-of-the-mill small electric car. Yeah, the insurance grouping's a little bit higher than maybe something like an equivalent Clio would be, but it still seemed quite high. And I called my insurer to query that with them a little bit, but also to make a couple of updates to the policy, so to add a driver and to adjust the annual mileage slightly. And they actually increased the premium to more than £900 a year based on those changes. So it's safe to say I won't be renewing the policy with that insurer. But I managed to go online, find an alternative insurer with exactly the same details, and insure this car from the renewal date for £530 per year, which, as I said at the start, perfectly reasonable and definitely in the realms of what I'd expect to pay for a car like this that I use as a daily driver that does some miles and is used for commuting and all that stuff. So whilst I think my previous insurer wasn't particularly keen to continue insuring this ZOE, especially with the changes I had tried to make to the policy, I don't think it's indicative of a massive problem with EVs. And actually, I've been with that insurer for a number of years. And what I do find is that, if anything, loyalty to an insurance company can actually start to penalise you. Now, I can only assume that this is a fairly fundamental sort of study of risk, right? So the longer they continue to write policies for you for a given vehicle or a given profile, the more chance there is that they'll end up having to pay out. So because they haven't had to pay out anything for me for a number of years, there's more and more chance that statistically they will actually need to. Even though you can say that all the factors like not having claims and stuff means that you're a lower risk, well, actually for a given insurer, and I think the logical explanation for this lack of loyalty is that they start to worry that they are going to have to pay out. But then I can move to another insurer, get a much cheaper quote, and actually at £530 a year for the Zoe, I'm more than happy with that. I don't think that represents a massive problem. Certainly nothing compared with the reports in some of the media of people being quoted, £4,000 or £5,000 a year for their car. Although I do know that a lot of those horror stories seem to be people with Teslas. Now, a Tesla Model 3 and Tesla Model Y, they start at insurance group 48 and the sort of performance models are group 50. I wouldn't be surprised if I had a car with a high insurance group like that it would be expensive to insure. I think that's more of what's going on with those vehicles, is that they're difficult because of both the fact they're high performance and they're high risk, and also then they can be problematic with repairs. But as far as I can tell, the Zoe isn't actually that bad. So the Audi TT that I bought last week for £590, it costs £470 a year to insure. So the Zoe is only slightly more than that, and obviously it's worth a lot more than £590, at least at the moment. Everybody tells me it's going to be completely worthless next week, but for now it's worth a fair bit more than £590, and therefore I think that the quotes for it are definitely in the ballpark, so I don't see that there's really too much of a problem. But where I do have a problem though is with my Citroen Ami. So last year I paid about £300 for the year's insurance. Now it was on a multi-car policy. You get discounts if you got more than one car and all that stuff. But I thought that was pretty good. It's certainly in line with what a lot of others were saying they were paying. Some people pay a fair bit less than that, but they're a bit older and, generally a bit lower risk in that regard. But I thought £300, happy days, that'll do. The renewal was £420, which I didn't think was too bad. But then, because I'm moving the Zoe to a different insurer, and I'm actually cancelling the policy for the Kangoo because I'm going to be selling it, and hopefully we'll get some videos on the go about that shortly. The premium for Ami with the existing insurer is actually £540 because they increase the premium because you've only got one car with them and not three. And that is quite a lot for a tiny little quadricycle that's limited to 28 miles an hour. Let's be honest, if I have a crash in it, there's not going to be much left of it, and maybe that's the worry. But it definitely seems excessive to me for what it is, considering I've just bought an Audi TT convertible and I can insure that for less than what they're quoting me for the Citroen Ami. I think that's nuts. And so to the comparison sites I went then, I thought, well, somebody else surely can get me insurance for less than £540. And I was amazed to find that actually, now quotes wouldn't come back from the insurer that I'm with at the moment because I've already got a policy with them, so they deliberately exclude themselves from the comparison site results. And so the cheapest insurance quote I got on the comparison sites was £840. And I couldn't believe this. I'm like, this is crazy for what it is. I can insure, I used to have a Porsche Boxster S, right, which is group 50, and it didn't cost anything like £840 a year to insure. So how Ami can be that, it completely blows my mind. And then I got a quote from Direct Line, who obviously they're not on comparison sites, and they quoted £660, which obviously is a little bit closer to my renewal, but it's still more expensive. So we'll stick with the existing insurer and begrudgingly pay that. But it does seem to be a real problem. And looking on some of the Ami Facebook groups and stuff, a lot of other people are saying that, well, actually my renewal's due now because I've had Ami for a year. And the amount they're quoting me is crazy. It's really high. I can't believe it's so much. And I can't actually think why that is. So We've not seen massive reports of people crashing them here in the UK. I haven't seen, apart from a couple of people saying they had really minor insurance claims because someone had reversed into it and things like that. I haven't really seen any reports of people crashing them in the UK. Okay, there was the thing in Monaco, yep, and that probably hasn't helped matters. But I can't say I've seen loads of reports of them being crashed or being stolen in the UK, which are normally things that would increase the insurance premium. And so I'm not quite sure what has changed in the last 12 months that makes Ami really unappealing. So we've established with ZOE and the Kangoo ZE that, for me at least, this isn't an EV problem. It's not because these cars are electric, but Ami seems to be following this trend that's been reported in the media of the premium soaring and almost becoming uninsurable. So why is that? And then I look a bit closer and I can see, well, actually, there only seems to be 3 underwriters that will currently write insurance for the Citroen Ami in the UK. And those are EUI, which is Admiral in all those brands, Admiral, Elephant, Bell, etc. You have UK Insurance, which is Direct Line, Churchill, Privilege. They also provide Citroen's own Citroen Insurance. And then Tesco will quote as well, although for me they quoted like 1,500 quid, which, yeah. And so I'm guessing, because there are so few underwriters actually willing to even consider Ami, that premiums are really high, and, well, actually they can charge what they want, because what else are you going to do? If you've only got a choice of 3 different underwriters, even if they've all got different brands, then you're going to pick one of those 3, and it almost becomes like a bit of a cartel, doesn't it? So I think we urgently need other insurers to start considering Ami, otherwise the market for it is going to disappear, because you're getting to the point where people might well be struggling to get insurance for it. I mean, I've seen reports of people being quoted 4 figures for insurance for Ami that pay a lot less to insure other cars. And so I think it's a very real problem. But in summary, I mean, are EVs becoming uninsurable? I think on the whole, no. I think for me, for normal EVs, like the ZOE, like my Kangoo ZE, it's business as usual. I had to shop around to get a better quote than my renewal, but it's not the first time that's ever happened to anybody. I think every year you see people saying, oh, my insurance renewal came in and the insurer I was with quoted me an absolute fortune, so I had to change insurer. Well, that has happened since the beginning of time. That's not an EV problem. I suspect that if I keep the £590 Audi TT until its insurance renewal is due, I'll probably need to switch company because the one it's with will want a bit more than is reasonable, and I'll get a cheaper deal somewhere else. That's just how insurance works. But if you've got a Citroen Ami, and to some extent if you've got a Tesla as well, that might well be a little bit more worrying. But is it an EV-wide issue? No, I don't think so. One of the things people talk about an awful lot of the time is, oh, well, EVs, you know, they're easily written off in a crash. Well, any modern car is really easy to write off in a crash. It doesn't matter what's under the bonnet. They're designed in a way that they're, you know, quite extensively damaged even in light accidents because of the way they crumple and stuff, and therefore you're looking at really big body shop bills. You're looking at really big bills for replacement cars, especially these days. Now people aren't happy with a like 1 litre Corsa for a couple of days while the car's getting fixed. They want a like for like replacement, so the higher car ends up costing an absolute fortune, and all those other factors that go into insurance claims. I would say any modern car is really expensive to repair in a crash. Yes, an EV maybe in some cases more so, but I don't think on the whole that that's true. People talk an awful lot about the batteries, but the chances of the battery being badly damaged in a crash is actually pretty minimal. If you think about it, right, the battery, it's underneath the car. The vast majority of the time it's underneath the car quite far back, and if you think in this car I'm in now, right, the battery's underneath about here somewhere. The chances of that being badly damaged in a crash, not actually as high as people might make out. There's much more chance you're going to be replacing the sort of bits of the car that just make it a car rather than the EV specific bit that costs a lot of money, i.e. the battery. And okay, yeah, there's some of the powertrain stuff might get damaged, but it's not proportionally any more expensive than the engine and drivetrain in an internal combustion car either. So I do think the argument about repair costs is a little bit flawed. It might be a little bit of an issue for Tesla because they do really strictly control their parts supply. And I don't know what it's like here in the UK or in Europe even, because I know in the US, there's a lot of problems with that. You see some of the big YouTubers in the US that have done like rebuild projects with Tesla, and they've really struggled to get parts for salvage cars, and Tesla like refused to sell them. But I don't know if it is as bad as that here, because I'm pretty sure there are like EU laws against that actually mean they have to supply parts. And so I'm not sure it's quite as bad, but you do hear of people, you know, oh, my Tesla was in a minor accident and it's been off the road for a while. So I do think there is still some issues, but how bad that is versus in the US, I'm not sure. I don't know if people are just making assumptions based on what happens in America. But I thought it was worth sort of sharing my experience with you of the insurance renewal. It's not quite as bad as I had feared, which is good. I think it's an issue that's being hyped up an awful lot. But ultimately, I also think that insurance companies are largely making it up as they go along. And in some cases, they really are taking the piss. I have heard as well that this isn't as big an issue in Europe as it is in the UK. So this seems to be a UK-specific issue. Now, why that might be, I'm not sure. Why we'd see insurers acting in that way here, but you wouldn't see it in other countries very close to us. Well, let me know in the comments what you think might be the reasons behind that. But, it's completely got me stumped. I've got no idea, to be honest. But thank you so much for watching. Do let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know about your experiences with insurance for your EVs and your petrol and diesel cars as well. It'll be really interesting to hear how it's going for you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.